listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up? How's it going? And welcome to another episode of the Straight to Video podcast. I hope everybody is doing great. Today's episode was a treat for me as I got to chat with one of the world's most highly respected guitar players, Alex Skolnick. Not only is he considered one of the original and greatest breakthrough melodic thrash guitarists for his work with the band Testament, Alex's talent and passion for music spans several genres, which today makes him impossible to pigeonhole. And after our conversation, it was clear this is exactly how he likes it to be. Outside of Testament, Alex delves into his passion for jazz with the Alex Skolnick Trio, whose latest album Conundrum is out now, and he has also toured as a member of the world-famous Trans-Siberian Orchestra. But to be honest, that is only a small, bite-sized look into his career and how busy Alex continues to be. Getting the chance to do this chat really was cool for me, as I explained to Alex that whilst my hard rock and metal leanings edge more towards the lighter, more pop metal bands of the 80s and 90s, it really was impossible to avoid seeing Alex's face and presence in the guitar magazines I brought back in the day, so it was a lot of fun to dive in and learn about his career and his journey. We talk about how he fell in love with music through a joint love of Kiss and movie soundtracks, and also gaining tuition from none other than some local guy in his neighbourhood called Joe Satriani. Hopefully there was a tone of sarcasm in my voice when I loosely used the term local guy. Hope you all enjoy this talk, and if you want to find out more about Alex, then everything can be found at alexskolnick.com, including links to all his social media and info about all his super varied musical projects. You'll also find info about his book Geek to Guitar Hero and his own podcast Moods and Modes. But right now, sit back and enjoy my straight to video chat with guitar legend Alex Skolnick. I've always known about you and Testament through like guitar magazines from me growing up into hard rock and heavy metal, but I lean more into the more pop metal kind of side of things. So I've enjoyed diving in and learning a little bit more about your history, which is really cool.
Yeah, I like all types of music too. So even in the circles that I'm in, and playing the heavier music, there's so much diversity, and there isn't like a tribalism at all. Maybe there was, in the very, very beginning.
Especially now for younger kids, they don't care. They'll just like listen to anything these days.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. It's gotten more acceptable to listen to anything. But yeah, when we started, it was definitely like there was that high school territorialism, and
like the Warriors of music in a way, like the film The Warriors.
It used to be like that. Yeah. You're either a punk or you're a metalhead or you're a modern rocker or you're a deadhead. But now, like within those categories, there's so many other categories.
Yes.
There's stoner metal, there's metalcore, this core, that core. I can't even keep track.
This used to be heavy metal, glam metal, and thrash metal, and that was about it.
Right.
You're from Berkeley, California, right near San Francisco. What kind of place was that like to grow up during the 70s?
It was very interesting because I didn't know how different it was. It just seemed like typical American city, but yeah, it definitely felt like the 60s still, even though that was more of a historic thing. Then, when I was aware of that, like, the early 80s growing up, felt like you're in the 60s.
Is like Berkeley has it got a similar vibe to San Francisco with like kind of the hippie feel to it?
Yeah, I mean, San Francisco is such a big city with so many different areas, but there is an area very well known called Haight-Ashbury, and Berkeley is very much like that, basically Haight-Ashbury, but a whole city.
Would you and your family visit San Francisco when you was growing up?
Once in a while, yeah.
Yeah. Was that kind of like people from New Jersey visiting Manhattan?
I think so. Yeah, definitely.
Both your parents are from like real academic backgrounds with PhDs and taught at university. I'm sure they had a different career path in mind for you.
Yeah, I think they figured I would be some sort of academic, which wasn't based on any of my interests or my activities, just because they're academics. So naturally, they're going to have kids who are academics. But I know it didn't work out that way.
You have an older brother who was also showing a love for music as well, though, right?
That's true.
Wasn't he a bass player?
Yeah, he was a bass player. Sort of the gateway into music, partially, at least through him. He was playing, he was a number of years older. He was almost 8 years older.
That's quite a difference when you were kids.
Yeah. So he was already kind of late teens, early 20s by the time I was getting an interest in music. But he played in some local bands, and I got to see that whole process of the clubs. I didn't know bands played in clubs, We had these giant concert venues, like the Coliseum in Oakland, which is where the Warriors play. The Cow Palace in San Francisco. And my first concert there, I begged my brother to take me, was Kiss. And that was incredible.
Just the two of you went?
We actually went with a group of his friends. He had a whole bunch of musicians that he was playing with. Yeah, I didn't even realize that. I thought that's where concerts happen. And then very short time later, he started playing these local places. And I realized, wow, I guess you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. What kind of music was he playing?
So the time he was being interested in music, there were big trends in music. So ska music was very popular. And really what was called new wave, stuff like the Cars.
Yes. Great pop songs.
Amazing. Yeah. And I appreciate it more now. Gary Newman, Kraftwerk.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So interesting stuff. Yeah. He didn't really like the heavier rock stuff, but he had some friends that did. Some friends that were very into Van Halen and UFO. And first time I was aware of bands like that were through my brother's friends.
You mentioned Kiss was your first concert, but could you tell us a bit about your first introduction to Kiss? I think it's a cool story. And when I read it, I kind of compared it to how me, and I'm sure a lot of people, actually got into Iron Maiden, because it was the imagery before the music for you, if I've got that right.
Yeah, so trading cards were a big marketing item for a long time. Beatles had trading cards. A bunch of groups had them. Even when I was in Testament at one point, the merchandise company.
Do you have your own trading card?
Yes. Yeah. People hand them to me all the time to sign, or they give them to me thinking I don't have, but I have so many. They were actually, very, they were overstocked.
Yeah.
They're not hard to find. They're on eBay and whatever. But so there were some kids in school with Kiss trading cards, and they were just gathered around. I never got the interest in sports that so many other kids had. And I just thought they were trading baseball cards, which is so typical. I had no interest. And I just glanced over, and then I saw these faces, and they're carrying instruments. And I just was in shock. What is this?
Are these from the new Star Wars film or something like that?
Well, yeah, I sort of tapped into that too. It was okay, yes, I love Star Wars. I wasn't a huge comic book guy, but I liked some comic books. And so, yeah, it was like seeing superheroes and musicians. And I think around the same time, they had some television ads. So they would come through in concert, and they would have an ad on TV. Do you remember noticing their ads the first time? It wasn't the year I went to the concert. Yeah, again, it was just what is this?
Is this a cartoon? Is this a new film? What
yeah.
is it?
Yeah, that was part of the appeal. It
yeah.
was like superheroes or Saturday morning cartoons meets instruments. And I did love music as well. I loved the Beatles. I'm still a big Beatles fan, but they were sort of modeled after the Beatles.
Exactly. Kiss will tell you that as well.
Two guys to play guitar. Everybody sings. It was very much like that, but a little harder. I just fell right into the music, and the songs are good. I defend the songs to this day. Maybe not, not the later stuff. I mean, once they got into stuff like let's put the X in sex, it got a little bit Spinal Tap.
I like 80s Kiss, but that was very borderline even for me. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. But the original Kiss, man, I mean, that's some really good music. I mean, you've got Bob Ezrin producing this. This is the guy that produced Peter Gabriel, who produced The Wall. And he will put that music on the same level. Yes, it's different. Maybe it's not for those fans, but it has a purpose. So yeah, I just totally related to it. And when I first started learning guitar, I really wanted to learn Kiss songs.
What was your first Kiss album?
First one I got was a compilation called Double Platinum.
Again, that's larger than life as well.
Yeah, and I didn't know it was a compilation. I didn't even know how that worked. I just thought, okay, you know what? I like the look of this one because it was mirrored and it was 2 records. I was a little surprised once I started getting some of the other albums. I'm like, wait, that song's on this record. I don't understand.
Where did you buy the album from? Can you remember when you actually got it? Did someone buy it for you or did you head on down there and pick it out?
Yeah, I was with my family and I was allowed to pick a record. It was in a mall in Oakland, California. I think it was called the Fruitvale Mall. Yeah, unfortunately, that area got kind of famous because it sort of became an unsafe area. And there was a film called Fruitvale Station, even pretty recently. But that was many years later. But they used to have this mall that was pretty functional in like the late 70s or early 80s. Yeah, there was a little record store in the mall.
Had you actually heard Kiss at that point, or was you just still going off the imagery?
No, I had not even heard it.
How was it getting back home then and listening to it for the first time? Was it what you had in your mind, do you think?
Yeah, it was great. I remember the first song was Strutter. That's what kicks off that compilation. There's just nothing not to like. It just was like great rock and roll.
Was there ever a Kiss Halloween costume for you?
Yeah.
Did that ever happen?
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
Such a rite of passage.
Who was you?
I was Paul. Yeah, the makeup was easiest to do.
So good. What year was that then, do you think? When would that be?
I think that was 79, probably.
Is there any photo evidence of that?
There's like a negative. This is pre-digital, and there's either like a negative or a contact sheet. There's no blown up photo.
You got to get that figured out.
There's probably a way to do it. Yeah, I really should do it.
So how was that concert then when you went with your brother and his friends? Did they do the whole heavy metal parking lot thing back then?
Actually, I think it had been 78 for Halloween because I was really young. I wasn't even 10 years old yet. And then when I went to the concert, I think it was a year later. So that was 79.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just remember just being shocked by the whole, because like people came from all over. And Berkeley is not that big. It's a very well-known city, but not that big. It doesn't have a huge population. You've got people coming from, the South Bay, what's now Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Which back then, I don't even think the whole tech industry had started yet. East Bay, North Bay, like all over.
Had you ever seen that many people in one contained space before?
I don't think I'd ever seen that many people in one place. No. And so many of them just not normal, not like model citizens.
I guess there was a distinct smell in the air as well, probably, was there? Like, what's that smell of, which you'd later find out to be marijuana or something like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at concerts back then, yeah.
Especially in San Francisco as well.
Oh, yeah, completely. I do remember like all the trash cans in the parking lot being full, overflowed with like liquor bottles and beer cans.
Before the doors had even opened.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, this actually happened. Wow.
Do you remember who opened for them?
Yes. They were called the Rockets. To this day, I don't understand it. This is one of the biggest tours on earth at that time. You're the support act. Nobody knows who this band is. Nobody knows how they got the tour. Nobody knows what happened to them. I haven't thought about it in years.
I'm going to Google that after to try and figure out where they're from.
Yeah. I mean, over the years, I remember the first time I saw Living Colour come through. It was like a large club tour. And I remember all of us excited about the opening act. Like, oh my God, they sound like Sabbath. They sound just like really Sabbath. And then a couple of years later, Soundgarden record comes out. Put 2 and 2. I'm like, oh,
wow.
That was that band.
Very cool.
The one time I saw U2 15 years ago, the support act was called Kings of Leon. So it's like almost always been my experience that the support act is somebody you're going to hear about later.
Especially back then as well, in like the late 70s and 80s and stuff. Those opening bands would be like touring the entire country. Like Kiss would probably take out somebody like Bon Jovi and stuff like that, and they'd hammer every venue.
I don't know. Maybe they just wanted a very forgettable band. Yeah.
You're getting into Kiss, and you was listening to the Beatles too, but you're also listening to movie soundtracks like American Hot Wax and the Blues Brothers. What was kind of the gateway into that? Was you seeing the films and thinking, I want to buy the soundtracks, or was you getting the soundtracks first?
I've figured out over the years that those really had a big impact on me, like more than I even realized at the time. They were like crash courses in music history, right? Because you got to think, I'm like 10, when these movies are coming out. I'm well aware of the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin, and Elton John, and Kiss. They're all superstars.
Things which are kind of surrounding you on the radio. And
yeah, you couldn't avoid them if you wanted to. But like the history of the music, like the music that these people had listened to. So through American Hot Wax, this is a film that starred all these 50s artists as themselves. So I didn't know most of them. I didn't know Jerry Lee Lewis. I didn't know about Screamin' Jay Hawkins. There were a bunch of great doo-wop groups in there. Yeah, Buddy Holly obviously wasn't there. He probably would have if he was alive. But he was talked about, like his presence was felt in the movie. And the one artist to me who stole the show was Chuck Berry. He just like completely stole the show. And I'd never heard of him.
Some will say the originator of rock and roll.
Yeah, and I had no idea. Oh, Little Richard. He wasn't in the film, but his music was part of the film. And that was the first time I'd heard that music. And the music that I liked the best out of that film was Little Richard and Chuck Berry. And then over the years, I'm just finding out that they influenced everybody. Like the Beatles started because of Chuck Berry. Lemmy's favorite artist was Chuck Berry. Yeah. So what a great introduction. It's too bad the film itself didn't do that well. It wasn't that great, but the music was incredible. The soundtrack was incredible. And then the Blues Brothers, the same thing. 10 years old, I didn't know who Aretha Franklin was. I didn't know who John Lee Hooker was. Ray Charles, I knew who he was, but he's got this amazing scene in the film. Like the two artists I was aware of in the Blues Brothers when I was 10, it was James Brown and Ray Charles. But I didn't know Aretha Franklin. I should have.
Later on, you probably would, but I mean, that's great that you kind of became engrossed in it at such a young age.
Yeah, but I was just like, who is that?
And when you're a kid, you just listen to those albums on loop. You just kind of constantly listen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they didn't just find her for this movie? And Cab Calloway. And my father he was, he was a big superstar when I was a boy, Like, wow. Yeah, so that was really great. And then I love the soundtrack to this day.
Where did you see the film at? Did you see it at the cinema?
I did see it in a cinema, yeah. I also remember it was a very valuable lesson because it got panned by a bunch of critics. I guess it was one of the first SNL skits to be turned into a film. And they were just saying, just stick to the small screen. It just doesn't work. And it was also the most expensive movie made at the time, which is nothing compared to like the budgets of big Hollywood films now. But they just said they spent all that money on this and what a waste of a budget. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And here it is years later. It's a classic. And it's funny. It's like everything a good movie is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be Citizen Kane.
Was it the Kiss concert that made you decide to actually get a guitar?
Well, I think I might have already been playing. I think I just recently started, but it was really, it was just, being a Kiss fan. Yeah, when you're that age, that becomes part of your identity. You're a Kiss fan. Loving the Beatles, just loving all this music. Another one was the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Very cool.
Which is an odd one, but we had a theater. By that point, it was a cult film, and they would show it at midnight on weekends. I wasn't old enough to go, but it had this sort of mystique and this coolness, being played at midnight and everything. Yeah, and I had some friends that would listen to the soundtrack. I really got hooked on the soundtrack.
That's quite an off-the-wall soundtrack.
Yeah. I remember it's really complex too. So like now I can learn it. I've learned some of it and I'm very impressed by it. But I understand why I didn't learn it back then. Because also a lot of it's not played on guitar.
Right, yeah.
But now I know how to do arrangements on guitar for piano songs. So I could do, or I even know my way around the piano. But at that time, it wasn't really music for playing, except for the Time Warp has this opening riff, which is this kind of almost punk heavy thing. Yeah. My first guitar teacher was really good. He was really good at connecting dots. He could easily find a Kiss song that wasn't hard that I could learn and then maybe connect the blues riff to Chuck Berry and say, okay, the Stones do the same thing here.
Here's your timeline of how all this is kind of coming together.
Yeah, because a lot of it just has there's so many elements that are like the same thing, right? That one blues vamp, da 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 da, like second bar of Start Me Up. There it is. Let Me Go Rock and Roll by Kiss. There it is. Zeppelin, rock and roll. There it is,
I guess around this similar time, Van Halen got dropped into the mix as well.
Yeah, that was a couple of years later.
Okay.
I think I was around 13 or so.
So not around the time of Van Halen 1, you came in an album or so later, or?
Well, Van Halen 1 had been out, that came out in 78. So I didn't get into them. I think they were in between Fair Warning and Diver Down. So they'd already had quite a bit of stuff out by that point. I'd heard my brother's friends talking about them, but I never listened to the music. My brother really wasn't into that stuff. He was, like more into like the new wave side of things. But at this point, I had some friends at school. I think I was in 7th or 8th grade at this point. They played me the first Van Halen record. And then I got it. Oh, wow. Okay, I understand.
So what came next? Kind of many hours sitting down and trying to figure it all out?
Yeah, well, I knew I needed to focus on sort of harder rock. So Ozzy had just launched his solo career too.
You were getting bombarded, man, with all this stuff.
Yeah, so kids were playing me Ozzy, and I was really one of the very few kids who played guitar. Kids didn't start guitar as early back then as they do now. So a lot of these friends of mine didn't play, but they liked this music. You should be listening to this. You should be listening to this guy. Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget one of my friends played me Mr. Crowley just for the guitar solos. And I never heard anything like that. It was like, oh my God, this is like classical music, but it's making classical music cool.
And scary as well at the same time.
And scary, yeah. It's got this horror film quality to it. I loved it. Yeah, and that was really like a very short time before Randy Rhoads was lost too. It was like honestly, it was like must have been like a month or so before that.
Wow.
When I heard about that, I couldn't believe, because I had just discovered him. Excited to have this new guitarist, and then I realized we'd never get to see him.
Did you ever get to see Van Halen live or ever cross paths with Eddie?
So I saw Van Halen on the Diver Down tour. God, I must have been 14 years old.
Yeah.
Maybe 15. Yeah. I went with a couple friends. Another friend had another older brother that took us. We were really far away, but I remember just still being just as knocked out as if we were up front. Like, it was that amazing. And the stuff Eddie was doing was incredible. I only crossed paths with him one time, and it was one of these periods. I've read about this particular period. He just wasn't all there, and he was very inebriated. Mm-hmm. So I was like super excited to meet him, but I would have loved to meet him sober, or at least before the 6th or 7th drink. Yeah.
It was during the dark period for him.
Yes. Yeah. I was rehearsing with Stu Hamm, great bass player, who I still play with. That was my first time playing music outside of the whole Testament metal circle. And we were rehearsing at a studio in LA, and right across the hall from us, Toto was rehearsing. And I got to know Steve Lukather, who I'm still friends with. And Eddie would come down because they were best friends.
They were good buds, yeah. Oh, wow, very cool. When you're seeing like Van Halen and Kiss and Randy Rhoads and going to these shows, where is your kind of headspace at this time? Was you kind of thinking, this is something I really want to pursue and take it to the next step? When did that kind of cross your mind?
Yeah, no question.
Yeah?
No question. I didn't really have a plan. All I wanted to do was play. So I was sort of just biding my time. I think I kind of knew I was going to join a band. I didn't really have like leadership skills. I tried putting a couple bands together, but just found it really difficult. And I had it in my mind, like, I'd like to just join a band that's already gigging, that's already got it going on.
So when did Joe Satriani kind of enter the picture for you?
So that was probably, I guess I was about either late when I was 14 or 15.
Yeah. So
that was probably a short time after I'd been to that Van Halen concert. And at this point, I was no longer studying with the folks teacher that I'd been, he was wonderful, but, he was purely like a rhythm chords guy, mostly acoustic.
Very traditional.
Yeah, terrific. But his style was more David Crosby, Bob Dylan, which is great. But I need somebody to show me how to do the three-fingered tapping of Eruption. It's like,
I got to figure this out. Got to get it done.
As it turned out, there was a guy that was good friends with my brother, and they tried being in bands together. It never worked. They were sort of like an odd couple because my brother really wanted to do the new wave stuff, and Danny was really leaning towards heavy rock.
Two very different things.
Yeah. Danny Gill was his name. He's still playing. He's in Sweden now, but he earns a living he's a guitar instructor, session person in Sweden. Taught at the Musicians Institute for a while in LA. Very, very great player. I would study with him, and he was the one guy that could actually play some of that stuff. I remember I got dragged to a party, and it was like older kids. It was my brother and Danny and his friends, and we were at this party, and there was a guitar and an amp, and it was being passed around. And I remember it got passed to Danny, and he starts doing the Van Halen stuff. And I'd never seen anybody do that.
Up close like that.
Yeah, the basic 3-finger thing. Like, he had that down. So right then, I knew I wanted to study with him. So I studied with him for about a year. Yeah, I guess from the time I was like 13 to 14. But yeah, funny thing happened. So I started bringing stuff to him, and I started learning how to figure stuff out myself. So I remember Diver Down comes out, and Little Guitars was one of the songs on there. And he had no idea how that was done. And I just said, no, I'm pretty sure he's doing it like this. He's taking these fingers. And he's like, show me that. How are you doing? Yeah. We had a few moments like that. And I started to realize, okay, maybe, and I love this guy, but I need to learn from another teacher. So his guitar teacher was Joe Satriani. And Joe was kind of like the guy, that's like the final level, right? Like in a video game.
Love it. Must even sound crazy to you. Like, you need to go and see this guy. His name's Joe Satriani.
That's exactly what it was. I didn't even know his last name. Yeah, it's Joe. It's like an Italian last name. He's the top guy. Like, he should be somebody everybody knows who he is. He should be super famous, but he's like a local legend. That's who that turned out to be. So I was with him almost 2 years. And during that time, the band that would become Testament needed a guitar player. And I heard about it through word of mouth, joined the band. That was kind of how that all started. I joined the band, and then I'm still studying with Joe. And then he gets his record deal for his first solo record. So then at that point, he needs to take time off from teaching. But at that point, like, I'm starting to gig, and things are like happening with Testament. And then the next thing you know, he's a household name.
Things went pretty well for you as well.
Yeah, I'm rising. I've got a foot in the door.
How aware was you of like the whole San Francisco Bay Area thrash scene, which was kind of starting to grow and catch fire? Was you a fan of it? Was you hearing that stuff, or was that exciting for you?
Yeah, well, I loved going to the concerts, and I liked the music. It's very funny though. It wasn't, to me, it was almost like the Rocky Horror music, in the sense that it wasn't music that I was planning to play. It was really just, I enjoyed it. But the guitar stuff that I was into really didn't have much to do with that, other than Ozzy having been part of Black Sabbath, which had influenced that. But I really liked, this sort of then current technical style of guitar playing, mainly Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, but also Michael Schenker with UFO, Ulrich Roth of the Scorpions. But I didn't know that UFO and the Scorpions also were a big influence on the thrash bands, even though it's so different, because UFO and Scorpions have much more melodic vocals. The thrash stuff was just like this brutal sort of punk rock like vocal, a lot of it at that time. A lot of the guitar, I appreciated it for what it was, but it was more about riffs. You look at Motorhead, Venom, a whole bunch of other stuff. It's like the lead guitar had this garage rock quality to it, which is fine. I was really like listening to these virtuoso, hyper-technical players. That was the direction I wanted. And I had no idea how you could put those together. But when I got the opportunity to join the band, I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot, and I'll see if I can squeeze in some of this type of guitar playing.
What was the reaction from the guys in, well, there was Legacy at the time, when you came in with your kind of style of playing? Was like, oh shit, we wasn't expecting that, but it kind of worked.
That's exactly what it was.
Did that immediately set you apart from everybody else in a way then?
I think so. I mean, it's, I think there was just a void in that area of music, because there were some very accomplished players But most of the very technical players didn't join those types of bands. They tended to either move to Los Angeles and join bands that in the mold of Rat, Dokken, and other glam bands, all of whom had incredible guitar players.
Because I was going to say, at that point, I guess metal couldn't have split in two more polar opposite directions. You had the San Francisco thrash and then the Hollywood glam metal scenes.
Exactly.
Was you a fan of any bands from that scene? I'm thinking, like, the caliber of musicianship was crazy. I'm thinking more people like Reb Beach and Andy Timmons, who, like, two incredibly talented and melodic, tasteful players.
I had so much respect. The music was sort of a guilty pleasure, especially, the stuff Reb was doing with Winger. All right, this is really kind of over the line, blatantly commercial rock.
But like I say, it's the total polar opposite to what was going off in San Francisco.
I was willing to make an exception when they could really play, and everybody in Winger could play their asses off. I mean, you had Rod Morgenstein from the Dixie Dregs, and then Dokken had George Lynch. Rat had Warren DeMartini. Yeah, so you had these like unbelievable players. So I would listen to those guitarists, but for riffs and just overall heaviness, I'd listen to Slayer.
Would you say Testament was essentially your first band?
Absolutely, yeah.
You got to even think that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Never done a gig before Testament.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, other than, there was like a classroom show and tell with a buddy who played drums, and we just sort of fiddled our way through some stuff. But I'd never done like a proper gig. And then suddenly my first gig with Testament is at a venue that's now become legendary called Ruthie's Inn, which is where Megadeth did their very first gig. Slayer played, on their first trip in the Bay Area. By that point, I was like part of the scene going to concerts there.
Was it you joined it when you were 16, recorded the first album at 18? I guess things moved pretty fast from that point.
Oh, yeah, like instantly. So next thing you know, Testament is doing its first tour of the U.S. We're supporting Anthrax. Second half of the tour, second leg of the tour, we supported Overkill. So, these are like with bands that would go on to last a long time. We go to Europe. Our first shows in Europe are with Megadeth.
How was you handling all this? Like just from an age level and just how fast it's all happening? And
it was a lot. I mean, it was a lot to take in.
Was you enjoying it?
I did, and there were things about it that were very difficult to adjust to.
You couldn't escape you in all like the guitar magazines. Was you enjoying that kind of aspect, getting the feedback from other players?
It was a nice acknowledgement because sometimes in the concerts, I felt like it was hard to be heard. And part of the reason is, back then, I think the PA systems couldn't handle the music. Especially like our very first tours. And you got to remember, like Metallica was just starting to become mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
They would obviously become a household name and they would launch a million imitators, some of whom would become, giants themselves. So, the PA systems had to be rebuilt to handle, and the amps, everything had to be rebuilt to handle this ultra distorted guitar sound. But originally, it wasn't meant for that. So you had the industry standard of an amplifier would be a Marshall, but the Marshalls were really designed for sounds more along the lines of like, humble pie.
Something from like 25 years beforehand.
Yeah, they hadn't really changed. The thing to do was you got them modified. So there were like people all over LA, apparently, that modified amps. Everybody had a modified Marshall. There were a couple guys in the Bay Area. I'm sure London had their guy, but you had to do that. And it wasn't always reliable. And now it's a given. Amps have a gain channel. They have a high gain channel without a modification. So the amps didn't sound good. We didn't have in-ear monitors back then, which is a normal thing now. So to me, it sounded like a wall of noise. And I did have a problem with that because any adulation to me, it's just very superficial. Yeah, it's wonderful for a moment. They love your album, they love your band, they're reacting in the concert. But if you know that it's just a fucking wall of mush and you want to play your heart out, but it's just like this mush.
Just becomes a bit frustrating after a while when you know.
Yes. Yeah. So that became a challenge.
Was it kind of like a breath of fresh air then when you left the band and went on your journey to kind of, I guess, challenge yourself with other different styles? That must have been like, holy shit, I can hear what I'm doing.
That was part of the motivation. I always loved many types of music. I felt like the part of heavy metal that we occupied, that space, was just so limited at that time. And it was hard to talk to anybody else about any other kind of music.
Could be considered when you actually left in the early 90s, you could say it was a tough time or the perfect time to leave, because the music industry it had just been through that massive shift with the Seattle scene. And
oh yeah, there was that as well. I mean, I think, there were many things going on. Yeah, I just knew I wanted to grow. And I felt like it was a fork in the road. I could stay, but if I stayed, basically, I'm saying, okay, this is 100% of who I am, and I'm just going to push aside all these other passions, other things I want to do. I want to improve. I want to be able to play. I don't know how to play with a piano player or a sax player. I want to know how to do that. I want to know how to write a chart. I want to be able to take an acoustic guitar and play a solo piece of music that doesn't require anybody else. And I knew it would be like starting over, and it was.
Do you feel like you're still learning today? There's always something new to learn.
I'm still learning, yeah. But at least I can do these things now. And the limitations aren't there, which is great. But it took being away from it for a long time. I came back to it, which surprised a lot of people.
I guess a lot of things had changed by that point as well.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, you could hear yourself better. I came back and I'd been playing with a lot of different projects and touring and session guitar player. One of the projects I did became one of the top grossing holiday tours in the United States, called the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. They wanted the stage quiet. It became an arena act with like a string section. But for that show to work, they really needed low stage volume. Whoever wanted them, they bought us in-ear monitors. And I said, okay, sure, I'll try this. And then...
was that a game changer?
Yeah, for playing loud music. It's such a game changer. So when I came back to Testament, and I had these, and I could play with in-ear monitors, it was like a revelation. Wow, my ears aren't getting blown out. I can adjust the levels. I can still have a regular monitor for feedback. And Testament's so loud on stage. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'll hear everything anyway. It's not going to block out the music. Now at Chuck, most of the band is on them too. So he doesn't need to be as loud. Chuck hears them in his ears. So I used to just hear him because he needed to be that loud. So yeah, not having those issues makes it much different.
I love the fact that you got called up for a Spin Doctors audition. I love that.
Yeah, that was just a weird coincidence. Yeah, I just done the tour that I mentioned earlier with Stu Hamm, and one of the crew members also worked for the Spin Doctors. So they'd had some kind of drama in the middle of their tour. Somebody booked himself a flight home.
Wow.
Yeah, apparently I came in second. The guy who came in third was like somebody who I liked. I listened to on his records. Guitarist from Edie Brickell. Yeah. And I played for Ozzy too. Played my one gig. It was an unannounced show at Rock City in Nottingham.
I wasn't at the show, but I can remember that happening. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Was that kind of a bit of a dream come true, just to get the chance to play side by side with somebody who you grew up listening to? That must be awesome.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Whatever happened, it was just like, what an acknowledgement, just to be able to share that stage.
Who was on drums and bass? Was it Geezer Butler on bass?
Geezer played the bass. So like, I'm one of few people who can say they played with half of Sabbath, including 2 Sabbath songs. I forget which we did. It was either Paranoid and Iron Man, or a couple of the classics. Yeah, Dean Castronova was on drums at the moment. And there was a keyboardist who's kind of hidden. But I forget his name. He's pretty well known, though. He's played with a lot of folks, yeah.
I remember when that gig happened, and then I saw them when he played Rock City afterwards, when he had Joe Holmes on guitar for the Osmosis tour.
Yes. Yeah, exactly right.
So how do you look back on the whole thrash scene and its history? Because you were an integral part of it, and it was happening so early in your career and essentially so fast. Do you have fond memories, even though there's some troubles and stuff, do you have fond memories of a lot of it?
Yeah, because I mean, and those of us who survived it, a lot of us, yeah, we went through it together. We came out the other side. We got through the drama. There was lots of drama. It wasn't just my band. In fact, my band kind of pales in comparison.
Wow.
Some of the drama, some of these other bands. Yeah, no like terrible scandals or anything like that. I'm glad that like the music matters. There's high school kids today that all over that know Testament. I'm like shocked, because I thought it would just die out, but it's really like caught on, and like, whole new generations of folks keep getting into it. And I like that I was able to add some quality to it. The guitar playing, people generally seem to think it mattered. And at one point, it really wasn't about guitar so much. I mean, now, yeah, you think heavy guitar or, heavy music, and you think, okay,
I mean, a lot of that stuff over the last 10 years or so is like the really heavy stuff. It is incredibly technical.
Oh, yeah. I mean, may he rest in peace. Alexi Leho, ultra heavy stuff. Very technical guitar player. A newer guy who I'm a fan of is from the band Revocation, Dave Davidson, the current guitarist for Black Dahlia Murder. What he's doing is like unbelievable. It's like, and that's not weird now.
Are the younger guys inspiring you then at the moment as well?
There's a few, yeah, like definitely all those guys. And it's wonderful that it's not weird. Like Black Dahlia Murder, you're not going to get much heavier music than that. But he's found a way to just take like the glam style of guitar playing from way back when, but with like modern chops, and just put it to this heavy music and just make it really work.
I love it that you're being inspired by all these guys and say you're just constantly learning and taking things in. It's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're all doing their own thing with it. It used to feel like I really had to sort of fit a square peg in a round hole, or whatever the analogy is. It was like that, putting melodic technical guitar playing into intense metal, if you will. And now it's like, okay, yeah, there's a place for that. Yeah, so I'm proud of that. I'm happy I don't exist in it 100%. I work with musicians that know I do that, but they kid me about it. Musicians that are just, not from that world at all.
Yeah.
But I like that, I can step into different musical situations and it worked. I'm not like just, oh yeah, it's that thrash guy. I sat in with a blues player friend, Mike Zito. People who didn't know me thought I was a blues player.
And that's great. That's great that you put these different hats on and just kind of mold yourself into each one and be comfortable, and people know you from that. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of instrumental artists, more on the jazz side. And sometimes people are shocked. They're like, you play metal? What? So I like to defy expectations, I guess.
Alex, I'll let you go. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I really appreciate you talking to me. I've loved it.
All good, man. It was fun.
Many thanks to Alex Skolnick for taking some time to talk to me here on the Straight to Video podcast. It was a lot of fun to chat to, and I appreciated all his great stories. Want to shout out once again to my friend and super connected dude Ben Christo for helping to hook Alex and I up, which is really appreciated. As mentioned earlier, please visit alexskolnick.com to keep up to date with one of the busiest musicians around, and you'll find links and info about all the bands and projects Alex is involved in, but also learn about his own book, Geek to Guitar Hero, and his podcast, Moods and Modes. If you're new to the Straight to Video podcast and want to dive back into earlier conversations, or if you're a regular listener but still have some chats to catch up on, then all episodes are available at stvpod.com, along with some Straight to Video music, videos and merch. Thanks for the great support. We're halfway through March and already it's looking like another super popular month for downloads and listens. So that's really down to you guys continuing to share and support the show, and it's really cool to feel like this podcast is continuing to grow. So please continue to do what you're doing. For now though, thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to doing it again real soon.